name is Maya. I'm 30 years old, an elementary school teacher at a public school in the suburbs of Minneapolis. I've been teaching for 10 years, never taken a long vacation, never once complained, even though my modest paycheck barely covers rent and a little extra I send to my father in assisted living. I don't have influential relatives, no weekend gatherings at golf clubs, and I'm the first in my family to ever attend college. And then there's him, Dylan Whitmore, 33, a financial advisor from a family with 3 generations in real estate. I met Dylan at a fundraising auction for children with disabilities, hosted in collaboration with my school and several city philanthropists. I went out of duty. He was there because, well, he was the biggest donor. Dylan entered the room like the floor itself paused to let his footsteps echo. Charcoal gray suit, a smile seemingly designed to soften anyone in front of him, and the way he listened, patient, present, never rushed, threw me off so much I nearly forgot my goal, to sell a set of paintings my 4th graders had created. "You're the 4th grade teacher, right?" Dylan asked after I explained the auction's purpose. I gave a hesitant smile. "We're just hoping to raise enough for a smartboard. The most advanced equipment we have now is a ceiling fan." He laughed, not mockingly. "Then I'll bid on every single painting from your class, all of them." I didn't know what to do but blush like a kid. From that night on, everything changed. Dylan made the effort. An unexpected message after work, a hot coffee waiting outside the school gate in the morning, or an umbrella already open whenever I stepped outside into surprise rain. I didn't expect someone from a world of numbers, contracts, and calculated risk to be this gentle or patient. But I was also aware we were not from the same world. He lived in a house overlooking Lake Harriet, a place I only ever wandered near on weekends just to look. He spoke French on the phone with his mother and could distinguish between 2 kinds of white wine by scent. I, on the other hand, still ate lunch with my students, homemade sandwiches, and read education books instead of financial journals. Still, love grew between 2 seemingly opposite people. We argued about small things, like how I didn't want to change my phone just because of a scratched screen, or how he didn't understand why I had to teach Saturday tutoring. But it was in those differences that I saw a real Dylan. A man who might wear shoes worth an entire month of my salary, yet still lay his suit jacket on a cold bench so I could sit after gym class duty. Last spring break, Dylan invited me to a beach house in Oregon. No one else there, he said, just the waves and wind. The sky was hazy that day, the ocean calm. We walked quietly along the long stretch of sand, listening to the surf, and when I turned back after stepping out of the water, he was already on one knee, a black velvet box in his hand. "Not because you need me," Dylan said, his eyes locked on mine, "but because you deserve to be loved, to be cherished, and to not do everything alone anymore." I froze, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it could be heard. Not because of the diamond catching the sunset, but because of his eyes. The eyes of a man I thought only existed in overly romantic paperbacks, looking up at me with absolute sincerity. And I said yes. 2 weeks after the Oregon proposal, I received an invitation from Dylan's mother. A small engagement dinner would be held at Marquet, a 3-star French restaurant on the rooftop of the Ellsworth Hotel. I skimmed the menu included. It had a string of names I had to Google to even understand. Dylan reassured me, "Just come as you are, they'll love you." I wanted to believe that. That night, I wore the navy mood dress I had saved 2 months to buy, simple, elegant, hair in a low bun, borrowed pearl earrings from my roommate. I stepped into the mirrored elevator and realized my hands were ice cold, even with velvet gloves. Dylan's family was already seated when we arrived. His father, Gregory Whitmore in his 60s, sat upright scanning my dress like inspecting fabric. His mother, Jeanette, platinum hair and a perfect twist, offered a faint smile, the kind reserved for people she didn't expect to linger. "She's sweet," Jeanette said, tilting her head the moment I sat down. "Quite polished, for a teacher." I forced a smile. Before I could reply, a server poured wine. Dylan squeezed my hand under the table, a silent comfort. I closed my eyes for a moment. Just some harmless formalities, Maya. Don't overreact. The meal began with an appetizer that had a name longer than my resume. I used my knife and fork carefully, praying I wouldn't stain the pristine white linen. Conversation flowed around assets, portfolios, real estate. I tried to keep up, but most of it flew past me like a different language. By the main course, the table grew quiet. Gregory lowered his glass and leaned slightly forward. "So, Maya," he began, "you'll soon be part of the Whitmore family. I suppose we should discuss a few basic matters before things move further." I looked up, barely opening my mouth before he continued. "Our family has certain protocols. First and foremost, there will be a prenuptial agreement." The table went dead silent. I could hear cutlery clinking 2 tables over. Dylan tensed beside me. "We haven't discussed that yet, Dad," Dylan said, trying to smile. "It's still early." Gregory nodded slightly, but his voice was firm. "Exactly why we should be clear now. Best to avoid complications later." Then he turned to me. "You're a teacher. It's a noble profession, but let's be realistic. Financial disparity is obvious. We can't leave things unstructured." I kept my tone steady. "I understand the need for transparency. I have nothing to hide, and I'm not asking for anything." Jeanette sipped her wine, throwing me a faint smile. "Very pragmatic. A teacher with high emotional intelligence. That's rare." But Gregory wasn't finished. "To be honest," he said, eyes narrowing like a scalpel, "do you know how many women like you have tried to make their way into this family? Love can be very strategic." I didn't answer. My chest burned. My face red, no doubt. But I waited. Waited for Dylan to speak up, slam his hand on the table, or at least challenge his father's words. Instead, I heard something worse. A laugh. Not loud, just a faint, awkward laugh from the very man I had planned to spend my life with. Gregory let out a mocking chuckle. "She's smart, Dylan. Knows how to play the emotion card. Wins over her students, then wins over the family. Impressive." Dylan turned to me as if about to say something, but before any words left his mouth, I stood up. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger under the stunned gaze of everyone at the table. I placed it gently on the snow-white napkin. Then I spoke, my voice eerily calm. "I didn't come here to ask for a life. I came because I thought I had found someone worth building one with. I'm sorry I was wrong." And I walked away. No turning back, no tears shed. I don't remember exactly how I left the restaurant. All I know is that when the night wind hit my face, I realized I was standing in the parking lot, heels sinking into the gravel, my hand gripping my clutch as if it were the only thing keeping my entire body from falling apart. I called a car, climbed into the back seat, not even sure if I gave the address. Everything around me blurred, while the events replayed in my mind like a looped video. Dylan's laugh. Faint, yes, but sharp enough to cut into the dignity that had already been sliced open by Gregory's icy stare. It wasn't the insult that hurt the most. It was the silence, and that subtle laugh. He didn't have to say anything. Just a glance of protest, a firm grip of my hand. One sentence, "Don't talk to her like that." But no, he did nothing. When I got back to my tiny apartment, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stood still in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my shoes. I leaned against the closed door behind me and collapsed to the floor. Not because of tears, but because I no longer knew who I was. 3 years together. And so many times I thought, Dylan gets me, he loves me for who I am. But now, thinking back to his eyes avoiding mine when his father accused me of being a calculated climber, I began to wonder, was I the only one who believed in this love story? I sat there for hours. No phone, no food, just staring into the dark, as if trying to locate the version of myself I had somehow lost. At one point I jolted up, nearly calling Dylan. I wanted to scream into the phone, "Why?" But I stopped. I looked at my bare finger, where the ring once sat like a promise. I remembered the moment Dylan gave it to me on the beach, wind in my hair, when he said, "You don't have to prove anything." I love you just as you are. But when his powerful father, just one table away, questioned everything about me, Dylan didn't repeat that sentence. He stayed silent. And that silence spoke louder than any insult. I started to question everything. Was I overreacting? Had I just thrown away a life of comfort because of pride? Would another woman in my position have just smiled politely and raised her glass as if nothing happened? Or was I just a poor teacher wounded by her own pride? But the more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. I couldn't live a life where I had to stay silent to keep others comfortable. I couldn't sit at lavish dinners where every glance felt like an audit. Couldn't step into any mansion in a wealthy neighborhood only to always feel like an outsider, tolerated because I had a certificate of approval from their son. And I couldn't share a life with a man who could kneel before me at sunset but lacked the courage to stand beside me in daylight. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, changed clothes, and sat in front of the mirror. I stared at the woman in the reflection. Red eyes, messy hair, mascara still smudged at the corners, and whispered, "Maya, if you stay silent today, you'll be swallowing unspoken words for the rest of your life." My phone buzzed. Dylan. The screen lit up, 6 missed calls, 1 text. "I'm sorry, where are you?" I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready to hear another word without action behind it. I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out the ring box Dylan once gave me. I dropped the mascara-stained tissue inside, closed it, and placed it on the high shelf. At that moment, I knew I was no longer Maya from last night. I stayed awake all night, but didn't cry. The shock no longer spilled out in tears. It drained me of every feeling, like I had just crossed a fissure between two worlds, one of fairy tale love and one of chilling reality. The next morning, just as I was boiling water for coffee, the doorbell rang. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. Dylan. He stood there in a wrinkled dress shirt, crooked tie, his dark hair tousled. In one hand, a box of muffins I'd once said were a little dry but smelled like cloves, and in the other, a bouquet of white daisies that looked hastily gathered from a nearby store. "Maya," he said, voice hoarse, "can I come in?" I nodded, not because I had forgiven him, but because I needed to hear every word. He sat across from me on the sofa, like a man reporting in, his eyes refusing to rest on mine for too long. "I'm sorry about last night, truly." I stayed silent, waiting. He swallowed hard. I didn't expect my dad to say those things. I didn't know how to react. That laugh, it came from nerves, not agreement. I clenched my fists, but my voice stayed steady. "You laughed when he called me a gold digger, Dylan." He exhaled, as if scrambling for a defense. "I know. And I hate myself for not doing anything. But my dad, he's hard. He always has been. I grew up having to follow him. All I thought was, if I pushed back, it'd get worse. I didn't want everyone looking at you like the way he looked at me all night," I cut in. "You didn't want me disrespected, but you let him say I was with you for money? For a credit card?" He dropped his head, his fingers twisted tightly, nails digging into skin. What did he say about me before the dinner even started? Silence. Just the ticking of the wall clock. "Hell said something," I pressed. "And you stayed quiet?" He nodded, barely. He said, "You weren't our kind, that I should rethink things." But I didn't believe him. "I love you, Maya. That's never changed." "Love?" I let out a bitter smile. "Is that what love looks like, Dylan? Knowing the woman you're about to marry is going to be insulted and doing nothing? Not even once standing up for her?" I stood, pacing, trying to hold myself together. "Your father didn't need to shout I wasn't worthy. He made that clear with every glance. But what hurt worse was realizing you believed it too. Somewhere deep down, you let yourself believe I might love you for your status." "No," Dylan stood. "No, Maya. I've never believed that." "Then why didn't you say anything? Why did your eyes look like you accepted it?" He froze. There were no more excuses. I pointed to the door. "Dylan, if that night you had said I was everything to you, If you had told your father I didn't need to prove myself, I might still be wearing that ring. He didn't move. I just didn't want to make things worse. You're wrong, I whispered. You were afraid of your father, and if I marry you, I'd spend the rest of my life with the man who's afraid to choose me. Dylan took a step forward. I'll fix this. I'll talk to him. I stepped back. Dylan, you still don't get it. This isn't about him anymore. It's about you. About the man I once thought would never make me feel small. For a moment, I saw his eyes sink. He wasn't the confident, charming man from the fundraising gala 3 years ago. He looked like someone standing at a crossroads between love and loyalty to family. But I couldn't choose for him, and I wouldn't sacrifice my self-respect for a love that wasn't strong enough. He left after that, without another word. The door closed softly. I stood in my apartment, heart aching, knowing that even though it hurt, I had done the right thing. 3 days after Dylan walked out, my phone buzzed at 6:30 a.m., a time when only students or coworkers had any reason to call. But the name on the screen stopped me. Jeanette Whitmore. Her message was brief, composed, just like the woman herself. Maya, would you meet with me one afternoon? I think there are things you should hear before making a final decision. I didn't reply right away. Not until my lunch break, peppermint tea in hand. I'm available Friday afternoon. Lakeview Cafe, 4 o'clock. I didn't expect anything major from the meeting, but deep down I wanted to know, did she think what happened was wrong? That afternoon, Jeanette arrived right on time, still every inch the picture of polished grace, cream coat, pearl necklace, faintly elegant perfume. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she began. I nodded, silently stirring my coffee. Gregory may have been harsh that night, she said, eyes drifting toward the lake. He's deeply traditional, hard to sway. But what he said? Part of it came from worry about Dylan. I looked up. Worrying about your son by insulting the woman he's going to marry? Jeanette pressed her lips. I'm not defending him. I only want you to understand. Being in this family, things are never simple. We have traditions, expectations, and Dylan's always been the steady one in Gregory's eyes. If you joined us, you'd face more pressure than you realize. I waited. Let her finish. Jeanette met my eyes, softening for the first time. But I also see Dylan's never loved anyone the way he loves you. And I believe, if you could be patient, maybe you could help him step out from Gregory's shadow. Don't let pride end this, Maya. Some sacrifices are worth it. I set my spoon down on the saucer and took a deep breath. You think I walked away because of pride? Didn't you? She tilted her head. I looked her straight in the eye. I didn't walk away because my pride was hurt. I walked away because, for the first time in 3 years of loving him, I saw clearly. If I took one more step, I'd spend the rest of my life bending over backward to be seen as worthy. Jeanette didn't answer, she just bowed her head quietly. That evening, while grading midterm essays, my phone vibrated, an unknown number. This is Robin Neal, Director of Human Resources for the County Education Department. My heart sank. We just received a formal letter from Mr. Gregory Whitmore citing concerns about your emotional stability and decline in professional competence tied to your personal relationship with his son. I clenched the phone. What is he trying to do? Mrs. Neal hesitated. I'm calling to inform you because the letter felt quite personal. But your principal, Mrs. Franklin, dismissed it immediately. She said very clearly that you're one of the most dedicated and grounded teachers the school has ever had. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. Then came a cold wave of fury. Gregory Whitmore hadn't just disrespected me, hadn't just humiliated me in front of his son. Now he was trying to destroy the career I had built over the past decade. I ended the call and sat still. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from silent rage. And in that moment I realized something. I was never meant to be accepted. I was always going to be tested, evaluated, judged, endlessly. No love can survive in an environment that constantly questions your worth. That night, I tore up the wedding invitation I had once held like a treasure. Not out of anger, but as a symbol. I had stepped out of a dream someone else had drawn for me. and I had no desire to return. 3 days after that call from the education department, I received a handwritten letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter written in purple ink on embossed Whitmore family stationery. The sender: Jeanette Whitmore. I hesitated for a few minutes before opening it. Curiosity won. Naya, I owe you an apology. Not for what I said, but for what I didn't. If you're willing, I'd like to meet again. Not for Dylan, not for Gregory, for myself. She left an address, a small tea shop by Lake Minicrista, far from the city center. Someplace I'd never imagined someone like her would choose to meet. That Saturday afternoon, I went there, carrying only a canvas bag with my notebook and a guarded heart. Jeanette was already there. This time, no pearls, no tailored blazers. She wore a gray sweater, her hair pulled back, and her eyes, for the first time, held no distance. She poured me tea herself, Earl Grey, the same kind I'd ordered at the engagement dinner that no one had bothered to notice. "Thank you for coming," she began. I said things I shouldn't have, but worse, I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I didn't respond, letting her continue. Jeanette placed her hands on the table, fingers laced tightly, as if trying to hold herself together. "I used to be like you." That made me pause. 32 years ago, I was just a girl from a small town in Wisconsin. My dad was a carpenter, my mom baked goods for the church. I met Gregory when he came to open his first regional branch. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Back then, I thought I'd won the world by marrying him. But, in truth, I just stepped into a life where I had to constantly shape myself to fit. I learned when to stay quiet, how to stand behind him without being seen as just a shadow. I turned myself into the perfect wife in their eyes, and in return, I slowly lost my own voice. I tightened my grip on the teacup. Something stirred in me. "Gregory's not a bad man," she continued, "but he was raised in a world that sees emotion as weakness, love as something that must yield to tradition and status, and I, out of love for him, accepted living within that mold. For 30 years. Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "You weren't wrong, Maya. You were just different, and they don't know how to handle different." I swallowed hard, trying to stay composed. "Then why did you let them humiliate me that night?" "Because I had grown used to silence," she admitted. "And that's what I regret the most." Jeanette reached into her bag and placed an old velvet box on the table. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said. "A woman no one remembers because she once turned down a wealthy suitor to keep her own life." I opened the box. Inside was a deep blue sapphire ring. Modest, not flashy like diamonds, but quietly beautiful in a way that felt unshakable. My grandmother used to say, "You don't need a light built on others' approval. Keep the one that burns within you." Jeanette looked at me. "I don't know if you and Dylan will find your way back, but promise me one thing. Never trade yourself to fit anyone's mold." Couldn't say anything, I just nodded. And for the first time since I walked out of that restaurant, my heart finally felt still. That night, I placed the sapphire ring by the window, letting the moonlight pass through the deep blue stone. Gentle, but unwavering. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew one thing. I was no longer lost in someone else's story. I was finally writing a new chapter, by my own hand. I didn't see Dylan for nearly a month after the last time he walked out of my apartment. I thought he would disappear the way most men do when things fall apart. Silence, self-preservation, and a vague ending that leaves you gasping for closure. But one Wednesday afternoon, while I was helping students craft water cycle diagrams out of colored paper, the assistant teacher walked in. "There's someone waiting for you at the school gate." It was Dylan. No designer suit, no polished shoes, just a rolled-up shirt, worn khakis, and a small wooden box in hand. I stepped outside, my heart no longer racing. Just a quiet, hollow space, like a scar not yet healed. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness," he began, eyes steady. "I just wanted you to know. I quit." I blinked. "You mean—" "I left Whitmore Group," he said calmly. "Not for you, but because I couldn't live one more day as someone else's shadow." I stood there feeling like a mask had been lifted from the man I once loved and once mourned. Where are you working now? A small independent financial consulting firm in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but honest. No one named Whitmore. His eyes no longer sparkled with entitled charm. There was exhaustion in them. And honesty. I've started therapy, Dylan added, almost anticipating my skepticism. I journal, I read, I garden. Sounds silly, maybe, but I'm learning to live without needing approval. It smiled gently. Kind of like me, learning to live without having to prove myself. We walked along the school's fence, golden light falling in long stripes. No tension, no rush to explain. Just two people who once loved each other, trying to listen. We began meeting for coffee once a week. No rehashing the past. No promises about the future. He'd tell me about the senior citizens in his community finance class. I'd tell him about little Ellie in 3rd grade trying to invent a singing hand sanitizer. Sometimes I wondered if I was falling for Dylan all over again. But every time he laughed, I'd remember a different laugh. The one from that night when he didn't stand up for me. That wound no longer bled, but it left a bruise no remedy could erase. One Saturday evening after our 13th coffee meetup, we sat at the park near the ferry. Dylan pulled out that same wooden box. I want to give you this, he said. Inside was an embroidered handkerchief with my name on it, the one he had taken from my drawer the first time he visited. You once said you'd only take this back when you truly believed. I looked at the handkerchief. Soft, light, and unfamiliar. Dylan, I said, eyes locked with his. You've changed. I see that. And I believe you're being real. He nodded quietly. But my trust died that night. And I'm not sure it can be reborn with the same person. Dylan didn't argue. He simply folded the handkerchief, placed it back, and offered a sad smile. I know. I've felt it too. I leaned back on the bench. If things had gone differently, maybe I could call this a beginning. But now I need a clear ending. Not because I don't love you anymore, but because I've started to love myself more. We sat in silence. Wind rustled the trees, flipping a page in the notebook I'd brought. No one picked it up. Eventually he stood, pressed the box into my hands. Whether you keep it or not, thank you for teaching me how to be brave. I didn't watch him leave. I just held the wooden box tightly, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted to remember. People can change, but that doesn't mean we have to go back. 6 months after that park goodbye, I officially received the keys to the first home in my name. A small bungalow, gray moo walls, lavender lining the porch. A loft nook for reading, and a backyard with just enough sun for mint tomatoes and a bit of dill, much to the dismay of my students who always wrinkled their noses when I brought herbs to class. The down payment? It was the savings I once set aside for a wedding. But when I signed the deed, I didn't feel a loss. Because I had chosen this for me. At school, things shifted too. After years of quiet dedication, I was appointed lead teacher for the 3rd grade division. Not a flashy title, but the highest affirmation for all those nights grading until midnight, all the after-school sessions for struggling students. My colleagues joked maybe one of those rich folks' complaint letters finally got you noticed. I laughed, neither confirming nor denying. Some wounds, gratitude can also heal. I slowly began dating again. No rushing. No searching for someone to fill a void. Just coffee dates, Sunday strolls through farmers' markets, honest conversations without having to edit myself to sound more acceptable. I was learning to love again, without losing myself in love. One Saturday afternoon, browsing books at a small West End shop, I heard a familiar voice at the checkout. You still prefer illustrated paperbacks, huh? I turned around. Dylan. He was wearing a gray sweater and jeans. Nothing striking, but there was a quietness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, as if life had stopped demanding he prove something. We greeted each other with a smile, no awkwardness, no lingering regret. He was with a woman. Soft curls, bright smile. They stood beside each other like two parallel lines, close enough to feel warm, distant enough not to overlap. Our eyes met. Hers held no jealousy, only quiet acceptance. Before leaving, Dylan turned back. He said only one thing. Thank you for not compromising back then. I smiled. Take good care of her. I am, he said. That evening, when I got home, the sunset spilled through the kitchen window, landing right on the sapphire ring I still kept in the drawer near the oven. I took it out, placed it in my palm, and watched the light fracture into soft shades of blue. I stared at it for a long time. Not to remember Dylan, but to remember myself. The version of me who once sat in the dark wondering if I was worthy of being loved. I opened the drawer, took out a small fabric pouch, gently placed the ring inside and zipped it closed. Then I tucked it away on the highest shelf of my bookcase, the one reserved for things that belonged to the past, but didn't need repeating. I no longer needed an object to remind me I was strong. I had become that strength. That fall, I sat on the porch steps, sipping tea, watching red maple leaves scatter across the stone path. Everything felt oddly peaceful. No prince, no castle, no wedding dress. Just me? A woman who was once dismissed, once threatened she'd lose everything, and who chose to walk away, keep her dignity, and begin again. Maya's story is a powerful reminder that self-respect isn't pride, it's the foundation on which we decide what we truly deserve. In a world that still holds deep biases around status and background, modern women must find the courage to leave relationships that make them feel small. Happiness doesn't come from being accepted by others, but from having the bravery to choose yourself, even if it means starting over alone but free and whole. What do you think about Maya's decision? Would you have done the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about love, family, and personal growth.